Predictable formula, all spectacle with no actual substance. This is the reality of Marvel. Nothing makes this more clear than watching The Boys. A morally complex drama with realistic characters is killing the MCU. When it was released in 2019, The Boys reinvented the superhero genre by asking one simple question: what would a world with superpowers really look like? Well, it's not a pretty picture. The heroes are abusing or murdering whoever they want. Meanwhile, their crimes are covered up by the corporation Vought, which uses money and power to stay in control. The main characters are a group of outcasts whose lives were torn apart by the system they're desperately trying to fight. For example, let's start with the main villain, the Homelander, a twisted analog of Superman who enjoys violence and cruelty. But just like everything in The Boys, he's not black and white. Homelander isn't just another evil Superman like the character from Injustice. He's been traumatized, raised in a lab, and isolated from anything that even looks like a real family, desperate for love and attention, seeing everyone as either beneath him or not worth anything at all. And he's not just violent to achieve his goals, he's violent because he's got a temper and the emotional maturity of a teenager. His character is just one of the many reasons why The Boys is destroying the MCU. The past few years haven't been kind to Disney's money printing machine, with just a few exceptions like the Spider-Man sequels. Marvel movies released after Endgame are disasters with poor writing, with main characters acting out formulaic plot lines which lack any real tension. And The Boys has shown audiences just how compelling this genre can be. Alongside other shows like Invincible, it pushed the genre forward. And most importantly, it matured with its audience. The Boys took the best parts of the MCU that people loved and made it even better. They took the parts that people don't like and made fun of them. The Boys is poking fun of the world we live in, not just Marvel. Commentary flows naturally as a result of what it says about our society. The endgame seems just laughably obvious. It's presented as if it's something revolutionary, like they're proving something about how strong women really are. Everybody in the world watching made fun of it. The Boys didn't even need to change the scene at all to parody it. The best satire and parody, though, doesn't just work as a collection of jokes. You still need the substance. The Boys did this and more, giving us an actually satisfying and hilarious girl power scene without a single ounce of cringe. Instead of the generic bad guys to crush, it's a real fight against the powerful villain. It actually has meaning for the plot. It's pretty much better in every way. The difference is all in the meanings behind the scenes. Corporations don't care about girl power at all. They're just using it to appeal to different groups of people. Disney does exactly that. It's the same reason they're ruining Snow White. The hypocrisy is what really defines this, and The Boys does a great job of showing it. Just like real companies, Vought makes every effort to look as politically conscious and inclusive as possible, to cover for the awful abuses of power that go on behind the scenes. The show even goes into how a politically correct environment doesn't actually help anyone and can actively be used against people. A bisexual superhero on the show has her identity used against her when Homelander forces her to come out on live TV.
We have a gay hero, Queen Maeve. Scoop for you, Maria.
Companies use their political preaching to get away with things all the time. It's a part of what The Boys is satirizing. Disney makes grand overtures about gay rights, all while censoring and selling their films to Russia and the Middle East, censoring any gay scenes possible. Nestle used the Rainforest Alliance to quietly sweep under the rug their breaking of all their connections with fair trade. The Boys' point here is that powerful organizations have no sympathy for the lives they ruin and will leech on any hot issue to distract you from their own crimes.
To prove we're just as fast or strong or skilled.
The symbolism runs throughout the show. Homelander and the other superheroes are literally representations of the power that some people have. The deaths and suffering they cause is far greater than anything Homelander ever did on the show. But just like the famous quote says, at some point you cross the line from personal tragedies into statistics. Butcher tells Huey abuses of power happen all the time. And big companies don't care about people dying, but instead refer to them as
Collateral damage.
it's part of the plan, and the world moves on without noticing. The Boys systematically picks this essential lie apart. We see the violence, and it affects us because it's direct. Homelander does it himself rather than signing some document, which eventually leads to people losing their lives. It's not the only way that The Boys is far more connected to the world we live in. It actually creates a compelling and uncertain narrative, which is most visible in the overall story. You know who's going to come out on top in a Marvel film? Heroes always win. The movie begins. They play up one character flaw that often isn't really even a flaw. Then the villain turns up and gets the conflict going. Then the heroes overcome their trials and finally emerge victorious. It's a formula that they have used over and over again, making it the junk food of cinema. Infinity War was so successful because it reinvented this formula. They made Thanos the hero of his own story, causing people online to lose their mind over discussing it. But it was one-time thing since Marvel started using the predictable formula again. And The Boys is so effective because you have no idea what's actually going to happen in an episode, and the boys don't always win. In fact, they normally lose. They don't have superpowers or billions of dollars. The odds are always against them, which makes them far more heroic than any other overpowered Marvel hero. The plot doesn't play out to hit the specific notes of a superhero movie. The characters make their own decisions, motivated by their own desires, entirely grounded within the context of the world, which makes the show chaotic and completely unpredictable, which is just one of the ways that The Boys is so much closer to reality while still being completely off this world. The sense of having no idea what's going to happen next is also the main reason why Homelander is such an effective and terrifying villain, switching from smiling to the cameras to murderous rage in an instant. He has no empathy for his victims. In one scene, he takes the hearing away from a blind superhero, dooming him to a life trapped in his own head, just to prove a point and because he finds it insulting that someone with a disability could be compared to him. Anthony Starr's performance is one of the best we've seen in decades. Anthony nails Homelander's wide smile combined with his completely dead eyes. His mastery of his expressions is really what seals the deal. The scene where Homelander talks to his alter ego in a mirror is a masterclass. He shows fear, anger, guilt, and hatred all in the space of a single minute.
And then, my boy, you can finally be who you were always meant to be.
It's his iconic performance that makes Homelander so popular. You can't go 5 minutes online without seeing his face used in a meme or as a reaction. It makes Homelander terrifying as the lives of the people around him completely depend on the unstable emotions that Anthony Starr portrays so well. When he's violent, it's often without any warning or buildup. He makes even yummers sound scary.
Yeah. Yummers. Guess you wanted to cram in as much fat fuck as possible, huh?
At the beginning, the performances were what made the MCU into what it is today. Without Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr., the whole franchise would have had a hard time at the beginning. But most of the big names now have left, their stories have finished, and they probably won't be back. Many stars like Benedict Cumberbatch and Chris Hemsworth have found themselves shackled by poor scripts and loose motivation. The Boys has the advantage of multiple seasons and episodes to develop these characters. But the villains in the MCU never even came close to what they've achieved. Most of the time, they're everything Homelander isn't. Their motivations rarely make sense besides moving the plot forward. Their plans are predictable and often stupid, nearly always devolving into a big fight scene. And it's boring to watch because we know the hero will always win in the end. The one-dimensional writing in the MCU mirrors what political commentary they do stuff in. Disney's attempts just power more ammunition into the culture war. Little 10-second clips to show they're taking a side. A battle that can never be won because it's defined by its division. Issues then get absorbed by the war, turned into simplified yes or no questions. And The Boys satirizes this through its treatment of the fans. In today's society, Homelander's fans are Trump supporters. Starlight fans are the Democrats, and like good satire, it pokes the phone up both sides of the fence. But its greater point is that the whole thing is a farce to begin with. The Boys reduces the modern culture war down to what it really is. Toxic people on either side aren't actually thinking about the issues, they're just rooting for their team. They promote it as much as they can. And if half the country is constantly at war with the other half, then it lets them keep everything exactly the same. Which is why it makes so much sense for the superheroes to stand in for politicians. Just like the politicians, they're powerful but have to make hollow speeches and get paraded around for the cameras. The Boys is blowing away Marvel's idea of humor as well.
Speaking of which, I haven't seen Translucent around anywhere. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?
Cunt's invisible. He could be standing in that fucking corner, plugging one out right now for all we know.
Instead of witty quips which take you out of the moment, The Boys keeps it to a minimum, mostly playing it deadpan. It's the situations that are funny and the characters just create the laughs. It's the kind of humor that adds to the story rather than making it feel like the characters are just taking it all as a joke. But it doesn't really matter if the jokes and the dialogue suck as long as the CGI is on point. That's half the battle for Marvel films. Which is why people like Martin Scorsese describe this as the junk food of cinema. Recently, though, even the special effects have been slipping, like the floating head from Thor. With absolutely everything being green screened in, it's really hard for any of it to seem like it's actually there. And of course, The Boys did this right too, by combining the same high level of special effect the Marvel has, with natural prosthetics and props underneath, makes it much more believable. Of course, The Boys is not competing for the cinematic experience, but it doesn't really need to. The Boys is taking advantage of the shift in the audience. The MCU has been going on for 15 years. Lots of people who grew up with it are past adulthood now, and they have questions.
I would make the argument they made Thor a dumbass. I just don't think it does the character justice. It's a very see the joke, take the joke, regardless of what it does to the characters kind of mentality.
They're looking for something to fill the gap, and shows like The Boys and Invincible have done that. And the MCU has done the opposite. The most recent Thor movie shows they're doubling down on keeping the kids happy. And in the process, they're alienating the people who have kept the franchise going for so long, whereas The Boys has already preempted this with their commentary on child stars. And we can assume Ryan will play a big part in the next season. If you take a look at Marvel's recent movies, it's clear they're losing momentum. Other than Spider-Man, which has its own unique appeal, they haven't had any films hit the $1 billion mark since Endgame. Lots of the most recent movies haven't even got close to breaking even. Generic Marvel just doesn't do it anymore, and the audience is tired of it. They've moved on, and The Boys was happy to pick up the slack by giving people better writing, actual tension, and pushing the genre forward. The Boys is killing Marvel.